Thank you all for joining us today as we journey through going from singleness to being single and ready. For the last few weeks, we've been covering on this one verse from Matthew 22, verse 37, where it starts about how we must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul. And then it talks about how you should love your neighbor like you love yourself. So we went from how you go from experiencing the revelation of the love of God and then getting to that place that you don't love your neighbors at the expense of not loving yourselves. And then we kind of covered on a few things that might come in the way or why we find it so hard to be in relationships. And we especially talked about insecurity, comparison, orphan spirit, and shame. So we pray that you've stepped into a place of asking God to heal you from your past before you step into the place of thinking even about relationships. All right. So the biggest question, I guess, when we're talking about relationship topic is probably, am I ready for marriage? Am I ready to date? Am I ready to get into a relationship? Yeah. That's always in our mind. So you're ready to get into a relationship when you are secure in your identity. You know where you belong to. You know your purpose, and then God leads you into a relationship, all right? And you're ready when you're fully devoted to God Himself, that you know your value, you know your worth, you know that you are valued in God, all right? Adam was so lost in God that God Himself had to come and tell Adam that, hey, I think you need somebody in your life. So that is the best place when you're devoted to God, and God gives you a purpose over your life, and then you're fulfilled and already loved in God, and then you step into relationships. All right. And sometimes we think it this way. A lot of times as Christians especially, we think that drawing close to God means loneliness. Drawing close to God means that God is going to take away all the relationships. Somehow this concept of being holy means God does not want you to have relationships. But that is not the truth, because when you draw close to God, He meets the desires of your heart because it's already aligned with what He has for you anyway.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. And when you get into a relationship, always evaluate as to why you're getting into a relationship.
Yeah.
Is it because you are lonely? Loneliness is just a state of the empty heart. And the cure, and the only cure for that, is Jesus. Then, think about it. Are you getting into a relationship because you just, broke up with your ex and this is just a rebound, and you see that person as needing to complete you? And if this is the case why you are getting into relationships, these are the wrong reasons why you would want to get into a relationships. So if you are someone that is actually dealing with issues of rejection or loneliness or even identity issues, you have to address those issues before you get into relationships, because, and the important thing is, what you bring into your relationship is what you get out of it. So if you come in healthy and whole, you get out of your relationship healthiness and wholeness. So it's kind of like an empty box. Whatever you put in it is what you get out of it. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So stay single till you get your life sorted out, all right? And I want to say this: responsibility in singleness gives you the opportunity to be fruitful in relationships, all right? So when you're responsible with what God is doing in your life, even when you're single, that allows you to be fruitful in the relationships that God gives you. All right. So, and if you don't know how to appreciate who you are, what God is doing in your life in the season of your singleness, that is going to bleed into all the relationships that you have thereafter. All right. And if you look at it, the other end of it is you're not ready for marriage, especially for people that have gone through relationships already, that have been hurt, that have been possibly abused even to a certain extent. You're not ready for marriage if you haven't stepped into that place of forgiveness. If you haven't stepped into that place of forgiving your offender. And more than anything, a lot of the times we forget this part, if you haven't stepped into the place of forgiving yourself. All right. So God not only wants you to just forgive somebody else for what they did, but also make sure you forgive yourself for the position that you were put in, or you feel like somehow you are responsible for everything to happen the way it did.
And a result of not forgiving a person or not forgiving yourself and not getting healed from past relationships is that you end up having a soul tie with that person. Now, if you ask, what is a soul tie? A soul tie is something that connects you to a person in a much deeper level than just the physical. And it is something that you will carry from relationship to relationship if it is not broken. And it is very important to get rid of soul ties before you enter into marriage, is because it has the potential to destroy relationships, because you are constantly comparing your significant other to multiple people. So it is very important to understand that when you are even dating, that dating is an exclusive and committed and intentional act that you do. It's an intentional relationship, all just to know if that person is compatible with you for the reason of getting married.
Yeah. So in a simple way, it would be that, if you're not ready to commit, don't get into a relationship. If you're not really thinking about marriage, don't get into a relationship. And don't get into a relationship because it's a fun thing to do. All right. So make sure you're not getting into relationships just because it's like a fun thing or a time pass. Dating is not for fun. All right. Because it involves the heart and emotion of somebody else as well. Right. And you got to think this, and we got to make sure that we think this, that this person that we are about to have a relationship with, they are first and foremost the son and daughter of God. All right. So they belong to God before they belong to anyone. All right. Before they even sign up for a relationship, the most important factor is they belong to God. And if we step into relationships looking at them as how God would look at them, then things would change so drastically for us. All right. So what do we do, right? Are we ready for marriage? All right. This is what we have to say is get your house in order, get yourself in order before you go down the path of inviting a guest to permanently stay with you. Right? I want to say that again. Get your house in order before you go down the road of asking somebody to become your spouse and stay with you. And make sure you know your worth. All right. Make sure you know your value. Make sure you're sorted out with God. All right. And get into this marriage, get into relationships, not because of a need, but because of love. Right. And then you get into the marriage not to find love, but because you're already loved. All right. So be so in love with God that the other person has to find God to find you. All right. That's such an awesome place to be, where both of you are so lost in God, lost in the love of God, that to find each other, you have to find God. Otherwise, nothing aligns. All right. So it's a good place that you can be there, and make sure you don't just rush into relationships. Step into that place, wait for God to do. Because even in Adam's case, he was sleeping when God gave him Eve, right before God gave Eve, right? So wait on God, wait on His timing. God knows the right person for you. God knows your need. God knows the timing. God knows what is best for you. And remember, when you draw close to God, you don't get into this place of isolation or loneliness. That's not what God is looking and what God calls holy. When you draw close to God, God meets the desires of your heart. All right. And I think if we can remember this, that relationships, and especially when we talk about marriage, is not something that men came up with. It's actually God's idea. All right. So He has the best for you. And we challenge you that even as you listen to this, that you will go back to God and say, God, I pray that I would step into a place of loving you so much, loving who I am made to be, and healed from my past, that I don't step into relationships with baggage, but I step into relationships knowing the value of myself and the other person. And we're going to step into a relationship the way that you see it, the way that you meant relationships to be. All right. So we just encourage you to step into that place, get yourself in order before you're ready to invite someone else to come and journey with you in this mission that God has set over your life. All right. Hopefully you're blessed by this, and we will see you next week. Thanks again.